Modern industrial society is entirely constructed from liquid fuel. Cut off that supply, and you execute a new type of warfare. It's known as a socioeconomic siege. In a hyper-globalized world, an adversary doesn't need to fire a single shot at your mainland to bring your nation to a halt. They simply weaponize your own dependencies against you. Governments often try to soothe their populations by pointing to a strategic liquid fuel reserve, typically claiming they have a safe 35 days of supply sitting in centralized tanks and on cargo ships. That metric is a catastrophic misunderstanding of logistics and human behavior. When a geopolitical shock hits, predictable civilian panic radically compresses the timeline of state failure. The moment a crisis makes the news, the population's psychology shifts instantly. Millions of people abandon their highly efficient just-in-time purchasing habits and immediately start just-in-case hoarding. Look at this chart showing standard daily gas station demand. When drivers suddenly decide to fill their 50 to 80-liter tanks all at once, localized retail demand spikes by 500%. Underground tanks designed to last 3 days are drained in a matter of hours. The physical bottleneck isn't the total volume of fuel inside the country, it's the finite number of tanker trucks and licensed drivers available to move it. When thousands of retail stations run dry simultaneously, the distribution grid is hopelessly backlogged. Millions of liters of vital fuel are now effectively trapped inside civilian driveways. It is completely removed from the broader economic grid, rendering that localized hoarding utterly useless. As the network fractures, centralized distributors are forced to enact brutal triage protocols. They intentionally starve rural transport and agricultural arteries to keep major urban centers alive, paralyzing the movement of food and medicine. Because the public front-loads demand, that comforting 35-day national reserve vanishes. Absolute systemic retail failure becomes a mathematical inevitability within 14 to 20 days. A government cannot allow its agricultural and logistics grids to fail completely. When the internal grid faces undeniable starvation, historically around the 90 to 120-day mark, the state hits a thermodynamic wall. It is forced into a strict binary choice: fight or die. The 1956 Suez crisis perfectly illustrates the fight paradigm. When Egypt nationalized the canal, the terror of immediate energy starvation gripped Western Europe. Just 95 days into the crisis, the British government panicked. They launched a desperate kinetic military strike, aiming to physically seize the canal and force the oil to keep flowing. The blowback was immediate. The United States weaponized financial markets in retaliation, resulting in severe superpower humiliation, economic backlash, and the permanent collapse of the British Empire as an independent global power. Contrast this with the die paradigm, seen during the 1991 Cuban energy collapse. When the Soviet Union dissolved, Cuba lost its subsidized imports. Its oil supply plummeted by 90%. Severe energy starvation guarantees the permanent destruction of the existing political contract. Apply this historical math to the 2026 blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. The United States sits as the insulated instigator. Protected by massive domestic energy reserves, it triggers a global supply shock for geopolitical leverage, externalizing the pressure without suffering domestic starvation itself. Iran acts as the active aggressor. By deploying naval mines and ballistic missiles to physically shut down this specific maritime choke point, they effectively execute a trade embargo against the rest of the world. The true casualties of this siege are the structurally dependent nations, heavy Asian economies, and peripheral allies like Australia, caught entirely in the crossfire. These besieged states operate on hyper-efficient, just-in-time logistics, with zero domestic crude oil. Right now, they are watching their internal grids tear themselves apart. Time has mathematically run out. These nations are rapidly approaching the terminal 120-day window, forcing their governments into a desperate corner. Unless a nation has already aggressively decoupled its essential infrastructure from imported fossil fuels, it cannot escape the math of the socioeconomic siege. These dependent nations face a rigid thermodynamic destiny. They must either deploy their militaries into a foreign war to extract survival, or suffer the absolute capitulation of their sovereign political structure.